There comes a moment in every life when the mask begins to crack. Not in anger, not in chaos, but in silence. It happens when you're tired of pretending, tired of performing goodness, success, or happiness for a world that only sees reflections, never the soul itself. You catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror, and for a second you don't recognize the eyes staring back. They look familiar, yes, but hollow, like something ancient behind them has been waiting for you to stop running. That is the beginning, not of enlightenment, but of awakening. Carl Jung once wrote that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, because to look inward is to enter a battlefield between what you show the world and what you truly are. We grow up learning how to be loved. We're taught how to smile correctly, how to suppress what makes others uncomfortable, how to be polite even when it kills something honest inside us. We call it maturity, but it's often just exile, the quiet banishment of our own truth. Every unspoken thought, every unexpressed anger, every desire we condemn as wrong doesn't disappear. It gathers, it hides in the corners of consciousness, the places we dare not look. And yet, that's where your power sleeps. That's where the self you lost still breathes, quietly, beneath layers of performance and fear. When Jung spoke of the shadow, he wasn't talking about evil. He was describing the part of you that you refuse to see, the part you shame, repress, and deny, because you were told it's unworthy of love. But what if that's the reason you feel incomplete? What if your endless search to be loved has only led you further from being whole? You see, love, as the world teaches it, is conditional. It asks you to cut pieces of yourself away to fit into someone else's image. But wholeness demands that you bring everything, your light, your darkness, your rage, your tenderness, and face them without judgment. Because the truth is simple and terrifying. You cannot be loved for who you are, if you've never met who you are. And until you do, every affection will feel temporary, every connection fragile, every silence unbearable. The path begins not in seeking love, but in daring to turn toward the dark and whisper, "I'm ready to see what I've hidden." There's a peculiar ache that follows us, a quiet, gnawing emptiness that no success, no affection, no affirmation can fill. You might feel it late at night, when the noise of the day has faded, and you're left alone with the faint hum of your own thoughts. It's the feeling that something essential has been left behind, and it has. From childhood, we learned that certain emotions were bad. Anger was dangerous, sadness was weakness, jealousy was shameful. We learned to hide these emotions behind smiles, to bury them deep beneath politeness and performance. And in doing so, we learned to bury ourselves. We became experts at repression. We learned how to construct beautiful facades, versions of ourselves that could win approval. We learned how to sparkle just enough to be liked, how to dim just enough to avoid envy, how to speak just enough to be accepted. But every act of pretending leaves a wound. And the deeper we bury the unwanted parts of ourselves, the more we become strangers in our own skin. Jung called this the loss of soul. It's what happens when a person becomes identified only with their persona, the mask that faces the world, while the true self is exiled into the unconscious. The result is subtle but devastating. You begin to feel hollow even when life looks full. You begin to overthink everything, every word, every silence, every look, because you're no longer acting from truth but from fear of rejection. You start chasing validation like air, believing that if someone finally loves you enough, the emptiness will disappear. But it never does, because love built on a performance can never reach the parts of you that are real. And so, you keep pretending, you keep smiling, you keep saying, "I'm fine." But beneath it all, something stirs. Maybe it's the suppressed anger that once protected your boundaries. Maybe it's the grief you never allowed yourself to feel. Maybe it's the raw, unfiltered longing to live, not as who they want, but as who you are. These are not enemies, they are signals. The shadow isn't punishing you, it's trying to return to you. But instead of listening, we run. We distract ourselves, scrolling, consuming, chasing status, chasing comfort. We mistake pleasure for peace. We build lives of noise because silence threatens to reveal too much, and every time we silence the voice within, it grows quieter, but heavier. We start to notice it in strange ways, in relationships that repeat the same pain, in the constant feeling of not enough, in sudden bursts of emotion that seem to come from nowhere. These are echoes of what's unhealed, and they won't stop until you listen. There is a cost to denying who you are. Every repressed truth returns as fate. The anger you deny becomes depression. The fear you suppress becomes control. The love you withhold becomes numbness. And so we walk the world appearing whole, but inside fragmented, split between the image and the essence, until one day the shadow breaks through. Sometimes as a crisis, sometimes as loss, sometimes as the quiet realization that your life, no matter how successful, no longer feels like your own. That is the breaking point, the moment of confrontation. The old self can no longer hold its shape. You begin to see that what you call happiness was often just avoidance dressed in light, and beneath that light the darkness waits, not to destroy you, but to show you what you truly are. There is a sacred truth hidden inside your suffering. What you call your darkness is not your enemy. It is the missing F of your wholeness. The moment you stop running from what you fear inside you, you begin to remember who you are. Carl Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating the parts of yourself that you've disowned. It is not about becoming perfect, it is about becoming real. The shadow is not just the repository of your anger, jealousy, or shame. It is also where your untapped creativity, passion, and courage live. The things that make you feel most alive often grow in the same soil as your pain. You cannot separate the two. Light only exists because of darkness. One defines and gives meaning to the other. The paradox is this: the more you resist your shadow, the more it controls you. The more you acknowledge it, the freer you become. This is why Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. We spend our lives trying to polish the light, to be good, kind, attractive, successful, but we neglect the roots beneath the surface, and without roots light becomes hollow, a glow that fades under pressure. Wholeness means descent before ascent. It means facing what's beneath your comfort, walking willingly into the cave that frightens you, and realizing that the monster you fear is your own reflection. When you finally face it, when you meet your anger, your envy, your guilt without judgment, you see that these emotions were never meant to shame you. They were meant to guide you. Anger reveals where you've been silenced. Jealousy reveals what you truly desire. Fear reveals where your soul wants to grow. Shame reveals where you've mistaken being human for being broken. To integrate the shadow is not to indulge it, it is to understand it. To say, I see you, and I no longer need to hide you. That simple act of awareness, to see without judgment, is the beginning of freedom. Because what's repressed turns toxic, but what's seen with compassion transforms. Imagine this: you're standing before a mirror, but instead of a reflection of your face, you see every memory you've buried. The times you lied, the times you hurt someone, the moments of cowardice, the nights of despair. And instead of turning away, you stay. You look, and you whisper, I forgive you. That moment, that stillness, is where healing begins. We live in a culture obsessed with positivity, but light without depth is blinding. To heal, you must descend. To find peace, you must confront the storm. Because your soul does not grow by avoiding darkness, it grows by transforming it. And this transformation is not a single moment. It is a lifelong dialogue between your conscious self and your hidden one. Every time you act with honesty instead of performance, every time you speak a truth you once buried, every time you choose understanding over denial, you integrate a fragment of your shadow, and piece by piece, you begin to remember your wholeness. The world tells you to love yourself, but how can you love what you refuse to see? Self-love without self-knowledge is just illusion. It is a mirror without reflection. To love yourself truly, you must love your contradictions. The parts that make you tremble, the ones you've called unworthy. That is the essence of Carl Jung Philosophy. To meet yourself completely, without masks, without excuses. To walk through your own darkness until it becomes light. You begin to see that there was never light versus dark, never good versus evil, only the full spectrum of what it means to be human. And when you can hold that, when you can stand in the center of both your cruelty and your compassion, your weakness and your strength, you find a stillness that cannot be taken from you. That stillness is not love from others. It is not approval. It is wholeness, the quiet joy of finally being real. When you begin to integrate your shadow, the world doesn't suddenly become easier. It becomes clearer, because now you no longer live to please. You live to understand. Awareness changes the texture of everything. What once felt like threat becomes message. What once felt like failure becomes direction. And what once felt like darkness becomes a teacher. Carl Jung said that what we resist persists, but what we accept transforms. That is the law of inner alchemy. Integration is not about becoming someone new. It's about reclaiming what was lost. The courage, the truth, the instinct, the depth you abandon for acceptance. To integrate your shadow in daily life means this. When you feel anger, you pause. You listen. What boundary has been crossed? What truth needs defending? When you feel envy, you ask, what does this person represent that I've denied myself? When you feel shame, you trace its origin. Whose voice planted that belief in you? Every emotion, no matter how uncomfortable, is an invitation to awareness. It is your unconscious knocking, asking to be known. This is the work, the slow, patient, courageous work of wholeness, not grand gestures, not affirmations shouted into mirrors, but small, honest acts of recognition. You integrate your shadow, not by conquering it, but by letting it speak, without giving it the power to rule you. Awareness becomes the fire that purifies, not the sword that divides. And slowly, you begin to live differently. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop chasing affection that demands self-betrayal. You stop confusing being nice with being good. True goodness is not the absence of darkness. It is the conscious mastery of it. To be good, but not harmless. To be kind, but not weak. To be honest, but not cruel. That balance, that integration, is strength born from self-knowledge. When you meet people now, you no longer need to perform, because you've stopped needing their approval to feel real. You can love without losing yourself. You can disagree without hating. You can walk away without resentment. That is the mark of an integrated soul. Wholeness doesn't isolate you from others. It deepens your connection with them, because the more truth you've met within yourself, the less you judge it in someone else. You begin to see that everyone carries a shadow, that every cruel act hides pain, every arrogance hides fear, every silence hides longing. And this insight breeds compassion, not the soft compassion of sentimentality, but the steady compassion of wisdom. Even your relationships begin to shift. Where there was manipulation, there's now honesty. Where there was dependency, there's now respect. Because you no longer seek to be completed, you seek to be mirrored in truth. The integrated soul walks quietly. It does not need to prove. It listens deeply. It acts deliberately, it forgives slowly but fully, and in solitude it finds peace. Not because the world has become quiet, but because the war within has ceased. This is not perfection, it's participation, a lifelong dialogue between light and shadow. The ego wants finality, the soul knows there is only deepening. Each day you practice awareness, you reclaim a fragment of your wholeness. Each moment you face discomfort with curiosity instead of fear, you become more conscious, more human, more real, and in that realness there is power, not domination, but presence. The kind of power that comes from being entirely yourself. This is what Carl Jung Philosophy teaches us, to stop trying to be loved and start being whole, to stop living as an image and start living as a soul, to realize that the love you've been chasing was always meant to come from within. When you finally stop running, when the noise fades and the masks fall, you meet something you've been avoiding your whole life. Silence. It is not the silence of loneliness, but the silence of return. The sound of yourself after years of pretending to be someone else. It feels unfamiliar at first, as though you're speaking with a stranger, but then you realize that stranger has been watching you all along, waiting patiently in the shadows for you to come home. This is the moment of peace that no approval can give you. Not the thrill of being admired, not the warmth of being wanted, but the quiet dignity of belonging to yourself. Carl Jung Philosophy reminds us that the goal of life is not happiness, it is meaning, and meaning is born the moment we accept all that we are. You were never meant to be loved for fragments. You were meant to be whole, and wholeness is not light without shadow. It is light because of shadow. The pain you've carried, the shame you've hidden, the flaws you've condemned. Each one is a thread in the pattern of your becoming. To cut them away is to unravel the soul. So instead, you begin to weave them in, not as scars to be erased, but as symbols of depth, humility, and truth. You begin to see beauty in the places you once feared to look. You begin to feel compassion for the parts of you that stumble. And when you forgive yourself, you start forgiving the world. The great paradox of healing is this: when you stop trying to be loved, you become capable of love. Not the desperate grasping of the ego, but the open stillness of the heart. You no longer demand that others make you feel whole. You no longer beg life to justify your worth. You simply exist, deeply, quietly, fully. And in that existence, you find everything you were seeking. The world may not change, but your vision does. You see the same light, but now you see it shining through the cracks. You are not perfect. You are not pure. You are whole. And that is enough. So stop trying to be loved. Start being real. Start being whole. Because only when you embrace your shadow does your light become true.